So we haven't officially introduced Randal yet, so let me use this opportunity now. Hi, Randal. Good to see your face.
That is working. Yay.
Randal, where are you calling from today?
If the echo is too bad, I can go on my earbuds, but generally, most stuff like this is all straightened out modern now.
No, we don't have an echo at all. I think we just have quite a time delay. I think you're calling from California. Is that correct?
No, actually, Portland, Oregon.
Oh, even better.
Which in the US is the 503 area code, which is what you see behind me. So I'm representing the 503.
Cool.
And the sun is going in and out of the clouds here. So I'm trying to use my shades to kind of monitor that. But if I get too bright or too dark, it's not me personally. It's the big shiny ball in the sky.
It's good to see the sun here in Cape Town. It's pitch dark already. We are in the middle of winter now. So for everybody else, Randal approached us a while ago and offered to come here on stage and do some Q&A. He is a genuine Flutter GDE Google developer expert. So, you know, while we all feel very experty, he is an expert. So
I'm labeled that. That's all. That's the only difference. That's
all. That is a distinction.
I have the title. That's all. Yeah.
So, but yeah, this is a great opportunity. So I think this might get a bit tricky simply because of the delay, but I'll hope we get through it. And yeah, let's see what types of questions we are getting. Maya, I'll hand over the moderation to you. Otherwise, I'll chat all evening.
Okay, I'll have a look and see. So we have two questions in our questions and answers. I think the first one is for Christine from Adrian. I'm not sure I understand why the classes work but the functions don't. What happens in the class that doesn't in the functional kind of approach?
Okay, I am not an expert. I am a newbie, so correct me if I'm wrong here. But from what I understand is that stateless widgets have context, right? So Flutter is aware of them, that knows where they are on the build tree, and functions are more of like part of the Dart language. They're almost invisible to Flutter. Does that make sense?
Anybody else want to jump in on that?
It's a good start. Let me also explain, because you singled out stateless widgets. Actually, stateful widgets also have context. The context and the build method that goes with it is coming down from the top to basically regenerate the code. But there are hundreds of optimizations to make sure nothing gets rebuilt unless it needs to. And if you extract part of your widget build to just a function, that is permanently glued in as part of the process. The build logic can't see that as a separate piece. But if you extract it as a widget, so it has its own build method, just like the original one had, there's a little more work to do in terms of binding the data back and forth, because now it doesn't have access to the original local variables in your original widget. But if you pull that out, from time to time, that won't even get rebuilt. So it's an absolute optimization, and it's absolutely necessary as you get more and more complex layouts.
That's a great explanation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't do Flutter, so I don't know what he's talking about, but I'm hoping the rest of you are all happy with that answer. Okay, so the next question we had here was, I think, for Sylvia. What type of performance improvements and change in binary size did you see with null safety?
Oh dear, now this is the moment where I admit I ran out of time and I didn't measure. I'll leave that for another talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there actually was one. Come to think of it, because obviously the null safety doesn't influence the resulting binary. It's actually just got to do with your code checks. So I think mine might have been a. Oh no,
yeah,
sorry,
no, I think it does change the binary, because you can at the compiler level remove quite a few branches. You can, so first of all, as a developer, you get in your static analysis already, you get warned about all, like I used to have everywhere assertions, like, you know, every time I do a repo function, I'm pulling something from my server. First thing is like assert ID not equal null. None of this is necessary anymore. And then I think also at the compiler level, there are a lot of situations where compiler would insert a branch and treat a null value differently, and a lot of that can be eliminated.
And this is especially noticeable in Dart to JS when you're converting this code to JavaScript, because the domain model of values for Dart aren't exactly one-to-one with JavaScript. And JavaScript has a lot of ways of saying false, for example. So there's all that scariness involved. but the idea, though, that if you can prove that this value that you're accessing is never going to be null, you don't have to put the check into it. It's like, I think the way Rust does array boundaries, it can prove that you'll never access outside the array, so that speeds up array access. Similar what Dart's doing. Once Dart can prove that this particular value can never be null, there's a lot of things that don't have to happen at runtime.
I think the reason I might not have noticed the difference is when we heard it coming out, we started preparing for it and we implemented the freeze package onto all our data classes. So we had null safety in a different form in the application already. So we had none of the checks or assertions floating around. So we'd killed that off back in probably around June last year already.
But I think still there is, if I think back to my language implementation days in college, there's quite a bit of extra optimization that happens under the hood beyond just removing unnecessary code. So what did worry me a little bit, though, is, and I don't know, Randall, maybe you have extra insight there. The documentation says, like, once you've converted your last class, you run your app, you will get some output that says you're now fully null safe. And I never saw that.
You're not done yet then. You probably still had those 2.8 annotations in some of your files.
I did grab through that, and I did run the tool and check if, but yeah, no, that's some, I have a suspicion.
Strong arm. It's pretty cool.
I do have a suspicion that I might have missed something still. I did not see the expected output, but I also didn't see any more annotations. So something is missing. There's room for another talk, I think.
Right.
Okay, so from the chat, there's another question here. Johan wants to know, but what about builders? Aren't builders just functions?
Well, everything's a function. So under that umbrella, yes, it's a function. But the build methods in particular are managed by the repainting framework, the framework that comes down and figures out what your screen's going to look like. Whereas if you just call something Fred, you know, it doesn't participate in that logic. So it's an entirely different thing. So yes, I hope that answers.
Okay, wait, he says, no, I mean when you pass in a builder function.
Pass in.
Under general.
Yeah, I'm in general at the moment. I feel like I'm playing telephone, you know, where you say something and someone else says something else.
Pass in builder function. I'm not quite sure what's meant there. I don't understand that pattern that he's trying to describe.
Okay, you'll have to give us
builders, when you pass in a builder function, because builder is not a, well, builder is a widget.
List view builder, for example. Yes.
Oh, yes. So the layout builder, the future builder.
Those are still optimized. And yes, that makes sense because you're only going to be building the elements of the list or whatever based on your index values of what's currently visible. So that's already optimizing it at that level.
Okay, we have a question from Adrian for Remy and Christine. Now that you've played with Flutter, would you ever go back to React? Any reason?
I wouldn't say never. But you can't give a guy a brand new toy and expect him to put it down. It's honestly it's just way too much fun right now, and like React's pretty stable at this point in time. So you're not going to learn anything new. You're not going to have any more fun playing around with that. I spent 5 years with it, so you know I'll spend the next few with Flutter and see what shiny new toys come out after that.
Yeah.
So to follow up on that, Randall, would you go back to Perl or Lisp?
Perl paid my bills today. So until I get my ideal Flutter full-time job, which I'm actually probably just around the corner from, but I can't announce it because it'll just make it annoying. But I really hope to be full-time in Flutter really soon now. And I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
Okay. What made you pick Flutter? I know I'm not sure everybody knows. I know you're quite a well-established author in the Perl community. It turns out I had your book on my desk for years. So when you contacted me, your name rang a bell.
That's $1.50 from you to me. Thank you.
All right, I'll send a check.
All the royalties all the way down. Yeah, I get about $1.50.
But I mean, you have spent years and years building up a Perl reputation, and you were one of the leading gurus in this, and now you are becoming a guru in Flutter. What made you pick Flutter as your next weapon?
So I got to give the short version of this story because I don't want this to take another hour. The short version is that Perl is mature. There are new things being developed in it, but not as much. And I wasn't doing any more Perl training, which I was doing during the late 90s, and that's what Learning Perl was written for, to be able to have as a textbook for our trainings. And I saw Dart come along because I had I think it was Seth Ladd or somebody pretty high up in the chain in the Dart world was on my Floss Weekly podcast. And I became excited about Dart. So I started writing stuff in Dart. And this is still really, really early. This is way back to 1.0, optional typing, all that crazy stuff, right? And then I saw Flutter come along. And it turns out, I'm in Portland, Oregon, just for locality reference. My buddy, Wim Layler of 30 years, was working for Google on the Flutter team that was building back then the plugin for Eclipse, building a plugin for Eclipse back in the early days for Flutter. Those of you kids, you all got it much better now. I had to deal with Dartian. I had to deal with Eclipse, but I still paid attention to that and made it work. Anyway, so his team was doing that. And I walked into his office that day wanting to pitch the idea of an Angular Dart book because that would be web related and I'd be interested in doing that. And it looked like a pretty good framework and all that stuff. But he said, I don't think you want to write an Angular Dart book. And of course, he had probably some premonition that Angular Dart would become a mostly internal project for Google, which is a bit to the consternation of some of the people who were using it heavily outside. But that's the way it is. Google makes their decisions for however they make them. And by the way, I'm a GDE, but all that really means is I'm unpaid DevRel. So I cannot represent Google officially or formally in any sort of reaction.
None of us is, yeah.
Want to make sure that y'all don't think I'm representing Google here. I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy who's spent way more time trouncing through Discord and Stack Overflow and all the channels and stuff like that. Okay, back to my story. So he walked me over to his desk and he showed me Hot Reload. And I went, oh my God, this is game changing. And he looks at me and he goes, we know. We know that this is game changing. And I walked away not talking about an Angular Dart book, but about talking about Flutter training materials and things. Now, little did I know that I think it was Seth Ladd had called him earlier that day, knowing who I was and knowing, why I was coming over. He said, don't let Randall out without saying Flutter, Flutter, Flutter. He needs to be saying Flutter. And so that night on my phone, I had an app that didn't come from the App Store. And I didn't have to learn Objective-C or Swift or all the iOS interfaces. I could just do it entirely in Flutter. And that was truly amazing to me. So I started getting on the Flutter bandwagon, and I really think it's got legs, is how I've been saying this for now multiple years. I gave talks at various conferences. I do a screencast. Just Google for Randal Schwartz on Dart and Flutter, and you'll find it. It's a YouTube sequence. And now I'm doing like these GDG meetups because I can and because I want to, because I want to share what I know. And I think nothing has been as exciting for me as Perl first releases, back Perl 1, Perl 2 days, as Flutter has been now for me. This is the new big thing for me personally. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Cool.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to popcorn style. What are your IDE preferences for Flutter? Because I know there are various ones. I don't know a lot about it, but just like quickly, we'll go around the circle. I see Sylvia first on my right.
IDE choice.
Yeah,
Android
what
Studio.
environment view? Android Studio, okay.
Android Studio, and then so what attracts me to Flutter is, aside from the hot reload, the fact that I can also do iOS code without any iOS knowledge.
Ah, okay. And Christine?
VS Code.
Okay.
It's got, you can have like the widget inspector shows up inside the IDE, which is fantastic. And you can run all of your debug and your hot reloading right from your one window.
And Reme?
IntelliJ. I run IntelliJ IDEA.
Aha.
That's my preferred tool. I gave up on VS Code a few moons ago.
Okay. And Randal, VI or Emacs?
Well, you know, I discovered only recently that Emacs had a plugin for the language server protocol that is in the back end of VS Code. And Microsoft came up with as a way of standardizing the interface. And so had I known that, I might have stayed with Emacs for at least a while. But I am VS Code. I love VS Code. It seems to be working well for me. And it's part of why I now get angry when I go back to Perl, because there's none of the strong typing that Dart has for VS Code. So it's really kind of annoying.
Okay, we have a question from Ahmed. Ahmed says, Wikipedia says, it's for Randal. Wikipedia says you are also known as Merlin. What's the story there?
Oh, that's a great story. I haven't said that story in years. Years. I'm getting old now. But years. When I was in high school, I read the short version. I read the book, The Crystal Cave and the Hollow Hill. It's a pair of books that is about Merlin. And I was fascinated by the name, and also fascinated by it had to be Merlyn, which is not the Disney spelling. It's the other spelling. And that makes it just as difficult to spell as my real name, Randal Schwartz, which nobody can ever get right the first time, ever. So
Sorry,
I have two names known by.
It's
both
middle
are
letter
difficult to
that's
spell.
confusing.
Yes. Schwartz, 8 consonants and a vowel. I mean, it's crazy. Thank you, Germans.
Pleasure.
Okay, so I have one more question from the Q&A. Ruben says, we can see if we want to answer it now or in the next event. GDG being all about community and Randal being a big community person, how will this past year change how we interact as a community? Has it weakened or strengthened us? Has it changed the way we think about community? So popcorn style again, anybody can grab the mic and tell me what they think, just not too loud.
Yeah, let me start on that because I think a lot about it. So Ruben used to be one of the co-organizers here. So hi, Ruben. We did in the organizing team. I think a lot about this because in the beginning of this pandemic, as we were sitting here, it's like, is it even a point to do online meets? Like, will anybody come? And it is harder. We have much less attendance than we used to have in live events, but we also had some really meaningful events that, basically reach out further than we could do before. There's, it becomes a little bit easier at times to attend a meeting for everybody. Like I live in Stellenbosch, so it was always a hassle to come into Cape Town in time and deal with the traffic just to make a meet. And I sometimes skipped it because I was tired. Now it's so easy to dial in. So it has pros and cons, and I feel we have tried various ways of networking during these events, and it hasn't quite worked out yet. We still have a few ideas where we want to do kind of more casual online meets, but it's a bit tedious. So I feel there's so many questions I would like to ask you guys over beer after the event that I don't get to ever ask. But on the other hand, all of a sudden, having somebody from Portland, Oregon, you know, being in a discussion with us with like perfect technology is just such a win. It also made us work a lot closer with the other South African teams, and I think eventually, we have ideas of getting some people from Kenya involved now that will kind of broaden our horizon a little bit again. And I mean, the world is an oyster. We can go, you know, do all kinds of cooperations now. So I think that's cool. And yeah, we'll have to see how you guys as audience react to this. Eventually, I think there's a bit of online fatigue setting in. But so far, it seems like we're actually growing.
Christine, how do you feel about that?
I mean, this last year has been difficult for everyone, right? And it's amazing that we can do these events and that they are available online afterwards. And I've joined a couple of Flutter talks that were hosted in Poland just because they were going on and like they had interesting topics. So like it's great. Like there's definitely a lot of benefits to it. I do like very much miss the meetups that happen in person because you also bump into people that you've met before previously that you might not communicate with in the chat. So I think like there's pros and cons to both of them. But yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm very grateful that we have the ability to do these remote sessions.
Okay, Remy, do you want to add anything?
I'm your typical anti-social dev. So when the world went into lockdown, I went crazy for about 2 weeks, and after that, I'm like, what office? So yeah, no, the in-person meets will probably be quite fun, but yes, as Sylvia mentioned, these are actually easier and more accessible. You know, a lot of the time. So yeah, no, I definitely join an in-person one, but Somerset West, Cape Town, it's very far away.
Randall, have you got anything to add? Yeah?
Yeah, I've been to 130 countries around the world, and I just got to check off 3 more just in these 3 GDGs back to back. So you got my virtual presence at some of these places. This is awesome. So it's kind of cool. But I do want to say that one of the things that this is opening up is that originally the GDG was about a local group that would have different topics every month. And so, you know, the Portland one would do something on Flutter, something on React, something on Angular, that sort of thing. They would go through this sequence of things, something on cloud, whatever. And I wasn't particularly excited to go to all the things that weren't about things that I thought I wanted to know about. But there have been, especially over the past 6 months, a number of GDGs that are, since they're virtual primarily, are now topic focused, like Flutter GDGs specifically. And I think that brings together people, even if it's, you kind of have to still worry about the region because you got to deal with time zones and stuff. That's the payment we make for living on a round ball. You know, we don't live on a flat ball. We live on a round ball, so we do have to deal with time zones. But I think this is opening up more participation for people because if I can go to the same place every month and learn about Flutter, like I was in the inauguration meeting for the Minneapolis Dart and Flutter interest group, which is basically a GDG promoted item. And it was great because it was like, okay, yeah, now we can focus on this, and we know we're going to focus on this next month. And it really becomes a way for virtual people like me to kind of pop in and help however I can. So I think in some ways, I don't know if I'm going to be going back to the physical Portland one once it opens again. I don't know. I might just do it virtually. I might just stay home and go see it.
Yeah, I think it's super exciting what's going to happen. I was speaking to someone with the co-working space, and the plans there would be to try and have kind of like hybrid events where we would have in-person situations where people are there, but with big screens, and then also dial people in. Because the benefits of being able to dial people in, I mean, I could attend international conferences, which I would never normally have to be able to take leave and plane tickets and everything. So it definitely makes things more accessible. But if you can find a way of hybriding the interpersonal connection part with the freedom of the online situation.
Go ahead, sorry.
I'd like to take this opportunity of throwing out a question to the audience, actually. It's something we had discussed in the organizing committee a while ago, and we were wondering if there is any interest in doing kind of just meet and greet events, basically, without any agenda, where we simply reserve some time. We all come on video, probably Zoom rather than BV, and have a bit of socialization and networking going on. I might not be for Reme, but maybe I think I would enjoy it. And I'm wondering actually if there's interest or if people just want to wait until we can meet in real life again. So if you have an opinion on this one way or another, DM me or contact us on Slack or whatever through Twitter. Let us know how you feel about this and whether it's worthwhile for us to set up these types of events.
Hey Sylvia, let's just do one and see how many people come, right? That's the way of voting.
Even better. Well, at least then it's you and me, so that's always fun. Christine as well, that makes 3, that's a crowd.
As we were creating the Perl user groups called the Perl Mongers all around the world, one of the things was we made it very clear there could be 4 different types of meetings. See if I can do the whole litany here. There would be a presentation, and then we go to a bar afterwards. Or there would be maybe just some casual Q&A, and then we go to a bar afterwards. Or somebody could do like a rehearsal for some conference they were going to go to, and then we go to a bar afterwards. And sometimes, we didn't really have anything to talk about, so we just went right to the bar. So yeah,
I'm noticing a trend there.
Yeah, of course.
I'd be all in. So unfortunately, in South Africa, the situation here at the moment is we won't have live events for a long time. Vaccination is progressing a lot slower than in the US. But yeah, I mean, at least let's start with a virtual meet first. Oh, I'm so happy. Yeah, good for you.
I got mine yesterday. My first shot.
Congratulations.
It's the first rule to do the first round of tests on the vaccines, right?
Yeah. There we go. We'll see.
No, I know the US is making great progress, and it gives me hope that this nightmare is over eventually. Yep. So,
maybe.
But we are a step behind you, so we're still stuck.
Well, except in the US, I don't want to get too political here, but in the US, it probably never will get to herd immunity. We've just been talking about that for the last couple of days, just because there's so many people resistant to this for their political reasons that we may never get to the right place where we can stop wearing masks. It's going to be weird.
I know where you're coming from, but I also realize the coasts are very different from the middle of the country.
Right.
Okay, I don't have any more questions. Does anybody on the panel have questions? Any more questions? Oh wait, there's a red dot in the Q&A. Let me see. I missed one. Did I miss one? Adrian said I'm in. That's not a question, Adrian. That's an answer.
That was the casual, the social meet.
Yeah.
Do you want a question for that answer? we can ask a question for that answer.
Okay.
No, I know what it is about.
That's fine.
There's a couple things I said in the chat. I'm just trying to look back real quick to see if we can bring those up in case people didn't actually watch the chat the whole time. No, I'm not going to figure it out now. I'll keep going for a second. I'll find something that I might have said. We answered the one about pump. That was good.
Christine,
and then somebody asked about separation of concerns.
Oh, okay.
I brought up that I use MVC, that's Model View Controller, because I learned that for Smalltalk. Yes, I was literally programming in Smalltalk 40 years ago. It's one of my first languages. So I've been doing OO since before OO was cool. But in there, even buried into the method names and the class names, was a separation of, you had model data, which you could send out to databases, get from databases, that sort of thing. You had the views, which the closest equivalent would be widgets in Dart. And you had the controllers, which is like some of the code that sits around one of your buttons or some of the code that sort of manages and mediates the models with the views. And you'll know when you have the right system for you when you can write tests. If you don't do that kind of separation of concerns, it is almost impossible to mock the things you need to mock when you're testing just a little part of it. That's just from lots and lots of experience with this stuff. Yeah, you'll know.
Okay. I don't see any other one.
No, me neither. I've been scrolling back in the general chat. There's a lot of cool stuff that I didn't pay attention to while I was chatting.
Oh, you can't you can't do two things at once. It's like I'm lucky because that's all I get to do. So I can answer stuff.
I'm actually not sure. I think once we process the video, the chat gets cut off, I think. So we might use that.
There was also my comment about pubspec.lock.
Yes. That was in return to the international plugin, I assume, right?
Well, the lock is set by a working solution for pubspec, for pub. So if you do pub get and it figures out at least one solution that works, it records it into pubspec.lock. One of the things I've used in earnest in really trying hard to get something to work, it's a nice little trick. First, git commit so that you can always roll back to what you got. But if you go into your pubspec.yaml and you get rid of all the version numbers so that it just has colon and a blank space, that's actually the designation for any. And it says, please pub, try as hard as you can to get these things to go together. And it will. And it will. And I've had it find solutions that way that it couldn't find any other way. And then I have this little one-liner that reads the pubspec.lock JSON and spits out the dependencies with those exact version numbers with an upper O in front of it. It's pretty cool. So that came in here.
That is a fantastic tip. I usually do this manually by looking up each package on the website, finding the last version number, and then editing that. And it takes me half an hour, and I'm mad. So thank you for the tip.
Just blank them all out. Just blank them all out. But be sure you don't publish it that way.
Yeah.
Because the problem with that is then you aren't declaring that I tested this with 413 or whatever. That's what upper 413 means. I should be compatible with everything that's still 4.1 until it stops.
There is a plugin for Android Studio that will actually check for version updates for you against your pubspec.
Yeah, that still takes a while. I like my version better. Just rip everything out after the colons, and yep, it works well.
Randal, I saw you also thought there was still a dot annotation, an old version in somewhere in the SDK, so that might explain why I never got that you're running sound null safety message.
Oh, yeah, it would. It would.
Although then I wonder how anybody ever can get that message.
Right. Well, I know I have for some things, but it was something fairly weird, and it was deprecated. It was something that was also deprecated. So if you're already moved, for example, the whole chaos about the whole button thing, I'm still I still set 7 different things before I get my button to be blue. I have to just keep trying over, do I set it here? How about this theme? How about this button theme? Is that going to do it? What about here? What about, does it have to be in my context? Is that the problem? I don't understand it all yet. It's not completely in my head yet. I'm still kind of frustrated by it. So, but it's a necessary change. It's a good change because it also makes it more aligned with the material design team, because Flutter is one of the few groups actually that gets huge amounts of attention from the material design group, 2 separate groups, of course, to actually make sure that Flutter implements the spec precisely. And material design people went forward to this thing more about theming. And so the the Flutter guys had to catch up with that. And so that's why they put that in. So also another tip, I can give out tips all day. Another tip would be Google for Flutter changelog and also Dart changelog, and check into that every once in a while to see what's actually happening with the Dart and the Flutter SDKs. because sometimes it announces breaking changes. It also announces cool new features coming up. 2.13 for Dart will have full type defs. So you'll be able to type def anything to anything else, not just functions. And it has a lot of cool things it can do for that. Like you can type def list of int as int list, but more likely you would use it with type def ID equals int, so that you can annotate that this is an ID specifically. And then you can even type def list of ID as its own type as well. And this is really slick. It's been asked for years, actually. They just finally got enough energy to make that all work. So yeah, that's in 2.13. You have to change your number from 212 to 213 in your website. One more.
That's easily done.
but cool. type defs are cool. And 2.14 is already being looked at. Just they don't stop. They just don't stop. I mean, I guess it makes it more fun for me.
There is a lot of change, and that's where I think what I ran into when I abandoned my app for a few months. But I mean, hey, the same used to be the case in Android. I think that's just
right.
Our life as developers.
We have one question in the chat. Adrian says Christine didn't tell us why how she feels about React going, if she wants to go back to React or not.
Oh.
It's much the same as Remy said. I like React and JavaScript ES6 specifically were my first love. Like I have probably about 4 or 5 years experience with it. But if I had built the same thing using React instead of Flutter, it would have probably taken like twice as long, if not longer. And like Flutter is amazing. I'm falling in love with it. I just wish Dart had object destructuring. Like that would be great.
Yeah,
that's on the list. It's on the list. They're working on it. I've seen the specs already for it. They're working on it.
Okay.
But you can't implement everything. You know, surprised me, the Dart team is fairly small. And so they look at the 5,000 issues and they try to figure out which ones are most important. If you have something that you see in there, you know, thumb it up, you know, because that's how they help decide. The other thing is if you don't see it's already in an issue, file an issue. I've done this already. I filed an issue just a week before Flutter 2.0 that said that there were some misspelled words in some of the documentation. Somebody else took it on. It was marked as good first-time contribution. Somebody else took it on the next day, and it shipped with Flutter 2.0 just a week later.
So I have some more popcorn questions. So I have another round of popcorn questions. What is your most wanted feature that Flutter doesn't have? The one that we're going to all file issues for?
DWIM. Do what I mean. Just DWIM semicolon and just does it. That would be cool.
The telepathic interface. Okay, I think that one's going to be a little bit longer in the making.
Flutter Web hot reload, and yes, they're still working on that. That would be cool. But the hot restart isn't bad. That's really nice. But yeah, Flutter Web is still a little early in maturity. Flutter 2.0, I'm going to say this out loud, and I'll probably get banned from GDEs, but Flutter 2.0 was mostly a marketing event because 2.12 Dart had been around for a while if you just asked for the right dev channel. And because people have been migrating stuff for almost a year on Pub already. And Flutter 2.0, yeah, officially now Flutter Web and Flutter Desktop are both in the stable branch, but they didn't really do much to either of those on this rollout. So I don't know that 2.0 really was the right thing, but it was a great marketing thing. Wonderful marketing. And I have a lot of people that I know that say, now I can use it. Now everything's stable. Yeah. Well, it's still kind of the way it was, but it's a different branch.
Besides object destructuring, Christine, what else would you like in Flutter that isn't there?
So I played around with the theming, and like Randall said earlier, it is a bit confusing or a bit of a pain. So like I made a specific app bar theme and I added it to the theme data and I added in custom fonts and all of that was really cool. But like sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't work. Yes. And it was very frustrating. So improvements around that would be top.
The themes. Okay. Sylvia.
I didn't even use the theming. I wrote my own.
So I think I would wish for some improvements on the iOS side. I think, you know, if any of you is an experienced iOS developer, you might not struggle with this much. But for me, it's kind of, I'm so close and yet not quite there. And one of the things I ran into a lot is like I'm trying to have different flavors of my app side by side, and I came across Dart Defines, which is really helpful with this on the Android side. And I think all the blog posts that rave about it have never tried it on the iOS side because it breaks down. Like I actually wrote a script that manually overrides some of the I forgot what some of the proc files and exchanges some names and switches to a new version every time I need to compile a new version. And I wish there'd be more support for that, because I think it seems like an obvious problem that you want to have a staging and a development version before you throw, you know, while you have stuff out in production, and you don't want to mix one or the other. And I'm baffled how hard that is for the iOS app.
And it's unfortunate that user-defined conditional imports was removed. So the only ones you have left are, is it Dart, or is it the VM, or is it HTML? It's like the only thing you get for conditional imports now. It used to be user-defined, where you could have conditional imports based on anything you pass in, but no more.
Remy, what feature do you want?
Shallow mounting for tests. Like that thing was so valuable in React. It would give us such a performance boost in testing, and I could cut my mocks down by like 80%.
Well, if you're doing end-to-end, can you just pull up integration test and do it that way on the device?
That's a separate package, but no. So with the enzyme, which we used with React, when you're doing widget testing, if you implemented the shallow mount, it rendered the parent with references to the children without actually rendering any of the children. So you wouldn't need to mock data to ensure that the children could render correctly.
Yeah, okay.
So you could actually still verify that the children appear in the tree, but you'd only actually need to provide data mocks for the widget you're physically testing.
Well, I believe that at least the testing doesn't paint anything that you aren't asking the color of. So it does have that sort of earlier stuff. So it basically builds the widget, does its layout, does its constraints and all that stuff. But it doesn't go through the heavy next part, which is painting the whole thing, unless you need to look at the corner color or something. So we do have that optimization. Yep.
Okay, I think we're just about. I don't have any more questions for anybody. And I think
it's after ATN Cape Town now, so I'm afraid we need to let everybody go for dinner.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Randall. Sylvia, do you want to take the goodbyes?
There is not much to say other than really thanking everybody and the audience for staying so long. But I mean, this was a fantastic discussion. Thank you, Randall, for volunteering to dial in, but also thank you, Remy and Christine. We couldn't have done it. Both of you are, I think, Remy, you have been here once before years ago, but Christine is definitely a new speaker for us. So I hope we have both of you, all three of you, all five of us anytime soon. And yeah, thank you very much. And if we forget anything, or if you have other questions, you know how to contact us and drop us a message.
Or go on to Discord or Stack Overflow or Reddit or the Slack communities for Dart and Flutter. Or let's see, what other places do I follow along? That's pretty much it. So that's about 3 hours.
That's a good start.
That was a great troll.
Yeah, we'll break your Wikipedia entry and then see if we can find you respond.
Yeah, go ahead, try. I have people watching that with like a hawk.
Okay. All right. I think with that, that's the end of it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.